This is episode 2 of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and in this episode, TJ and I will discuss our favorite Doctor Who stories from the era of the first Doctor, William Hartnell. Hello, this is Spencer, and welcome to episode 2 of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. With me today, I've got TJ, one of the original veteran geeks of the blog back when it was Mormon Geeks. TJ, go ahead and say hi.
I'm TJ. I was one of the original geeks. I attempted to I attempted to podcast a while back, and wasn't able to continue it, just life in general. So I'm excited to be able to take part in one of these early nights.
We had actually attempted to, well, we didn't attempt. We did a podcast episode together back when you were
That's
on the
right.
team and I wasn't.
That is right. How times have changed and switching places and all that fun.
But you're gonna be around a while yet with the series that we've got planned. It's a shame though that I
since you're
don't
trying
think
to copy me. I mean,
yeah. No, this wasn't me copying you. This is something we discussed.
I know. I meant copying me and watching Doctor Who from the beginning again.
Okay, yes, that part I'll admit, but
it's okay.
I watched Doctor Who first, so I think
Yes, you did.
That
is true.
Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
Timey-wimey stuff.
Which is actually going to be very relevant phrase for us with this series that we've got going on. We're going to be doing.
Most likely, yes.
So for those of you that, if you're listening to this episode, you're probably aware, but I've been doing a series of classic Doctor Who posts since the beginning of the year. Just rewatching the classic era. I copied TJ when he started over, and so far, I'm currently, as of August of this year, I'm currently on the Evil of the Daleks in the second Doctor era. TJ, where are you at this point?
I am on the Web of Fear. I watched the first episode a while ago, and now I've got to watch it again and start it over because I vaguely forgot what happened. I think I remember, but I hate when I start a series or a story like that, and then I go to episode 2 and I feel like I'm missing something. You know, when characters are not recurring and everything, it's harder to know who is who. And we'll come to that part of the conversation as well when it comes to some of the audio that I've got to listen to.
Basically, what I'm trying to say is none of this actually aligns with real time, so it's gonna be exciting.
But it's all Doctor Who, and that's what makes it awesome.
Yeah, it's timeless and timey-wimey all at the same time.
Yes, it is.
So, and that's how you get a sci-fi series that's lasted 60 years. Even when it was off the air, it was growing.
Yeah, I remember I have a cousin who I haven't met very many times, but we were at our grandparents' funeral, and he was telling me about Doctor Who and how awesome it was, and he'd been watching it. He's a couple years younger than me too, if I remember. Well, he's younger than me, I know that much. And so I remember him talking about Doctor Who, and one of the first times I ever spoke to anyone who was a fan of it that I can recall. I mean, I'd heard of Doctor Who, but never had watched it or really had any other. It was just this far off thing back then, but he was watching reruns on some random channel in his neighborhood.
PBS, so I think, had it at one point.
I'm pretty sure that's what it would have been, and he recorded them all, and he wrote fan fiction for it, if I remember right. And I used to think, man, what a geek, and here I am. I love Doctor Who.
So if you listen to episode 1, you'll have heard me, Michael, and Rob starting off the episode with some recommendations of things that we've been watching recently. So we're going to try to do that as well, kind of make that a tradition for every episode. So for me, I've been rewatching Daredevil, which I haven't done since it was put on Disney Plus. This is my first time through, with Echo being released later this year, and Daredevil appearing and then getting his own series later. Uh, Charlie Cox said at Dallas Fan Expo that he views, I'm paraphrasing, but he views the two iterations of Daredevil as separate, but it's all still Marvel. So this is how my brain works. I'm gonna rewatch it. It's fine.
It's good. You rewatch things plenty
I
of times.
rewatch a
I do
lot of
that
things.
too. And it's
And
not
the nice
bad.
thing I'm gonna do is that in October, I think is when I've planned for it. I'm gonna be doing a blog post of the things you missed in Daredevil or what you need to know about Daredevil, since it is TVMA, and I know not all of our readers and listeners will want to watch that because there haven't been any sex scenes in what I've watched so far, but I know it's coming up, and but it's definitely been gory. So
Yeah, gore, it really bothers me. I don't know, makes me feel bad for whatever, depending on how bad the gore is. It's one of the
yeah,
reasons why I haven't watched Daredevil.
well, I mean,
And
in one episode, and I don't think this is a spoiler because it's been out almost 10 years, but in one episode,
spoiler, I haven't seen it.
I don't care.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I know.
Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, like bashes a guy's head in with a car door. It's a little bit gory.
And that's a lovely image we'll continue with.
So let's move on to something maybe happier. What have you been watching, TJ?
I have just had my brother here for the last couple of weeks, helping out, and we introduced him to Leverage.
Oh, you love
Um,
Leverage.
I love Leverage. I can't not love Leverage. And if
You
you are
can't
a Doctor
leverage
Who
your love for
fan, I
Leverage.
can't leverage my love for Leverage. That is absolutely
I'm
correct.
not even sure if I use that correctly as a verb.
I don't think I have. I don't think that's properly used. I'm going to be honest.
I don't care at this point.
I'm leveraging my love of Leverage.
There you go.
I'm leveraging my position here in this podcast to tell you how awesome Leverage is again.
I mean,
Because
you did a blog post, a guest
we
post for
did.
the blog 2 years ago, and you're still talking about it.
I'm not done talking about it either. And I would highly recommend it for any Doctor Who fan because there are a lot of fan service moments for Doctor Who fans, which is why I keep trying to convince you to watch it.
it'll probably happen eventually. I'm just got a lot of shows on my list right now. It's
No, and
fine.
sometimes it's nice to
Everything is fine.
everything's fine and on fire. And sometimes it's nice to when you know something, it's comforting to watch when you know what's going to happen. You know,
Yeah.
River's going to die, and it's comforting to rewatch the library. I don't know.
Yeah,
Not
it's a
for
weird concept, but
it is. But
anyways,
so transitioning to Doctor Who, or
yes,
since
transition.
that was a great transition for Doctor Who. So Doctor Who, our first Doctor stories.
So William Hartnell was the first Doctor. He premiered as the Doctor in 1963, not the fez wearing or screwdriver wielding hero that we know now, but a grumpy old grandpa, literally. And we're not going to delve into his character too much right now. That's going to be our third uh, episode in this series. Um, so for today, we both picked out five of our favorite stories from the first Doctor era. Um, four of them overlapped with each other, so we ended up with 6 episodes.
And we legitimately did not plan that. Like,
We didn't
I
even
was
watch it.
expecting we didn't watch them at the same time. I have a an Excel spreadsheet that I keep where I rank things and I move it around and I think about it and move it around some more because I realized no, I don't like this aspect, and so mine changed up until we gave each other our lists. So only one
Even as
story
we were
difference.
texting each other today, you were
I
fluctuating
was I
things.
was hedging on or hemming and hawing on two of them, but I kind of felt like I felt like I was doing myself an injustice and trying to be a people pleaser by saying, "Oh, let me question this a little bit more." And I'm going with how I emotionally felt watching the episode and if I appreciated it and liked it.
Yeah,
And that's
that's how you got
my
to do it.
way to rate it and rank it.
So we're going to talk about all six stories that appeared on our two lists. Um, no particular order except that it's the
Well, it is order, it's just not rating order.
yes, it's not in, it's not
It's airing order.
yeah, we got to be careful not to say chronological order because
No, because
who
who
knows
doesn't
when the Romans takes
either.
place in the double digits and the arc takes place thousands of years in the future
With
after
like a couple hundred or whatever gap in it.
then
Yeah.
and the toy maker takes place out of time completely, it seems. So
Hmm.
oh, and then try to place the chase. Literally chasing across time. We'll get to all these, don't you worry.
I mean, it's a good thing that we don't have like Dalek invasion of Earth. And can you imagine writing that? It's worse than River Song's timeline. Let's just go with that.
Or Dalek's master plan.
Yeah, Dalek's master plan.
It's all messy. Wibbly
That
wobbly
one,
and all that.
that one's messy.
So let's start with Keys of Marinus. It was on your list, but it actually was on one of my top episodes for when my first watch through, and I can include my first Doctor blog post that I had done back in the day. That why don't you start since you're the one who put it on your list this time?
Okay, not a problem.
Short summary, and then
I
I'll and
what?
short summary, and then your thoughts
Short
on the
summary.
story.
Okay, the keys of Marinus is when they go to is Marinus even the name of the planet? No, that's a person, isn't it?
I believe
I don't
so.
remember now. Anyway, it here's the thing is if you know Doctor Who well enough, and you know when the fourth Doctor goes and tries to grab all the pieces with the first Romana throughout the whole
The
season,
Key to Time, I think
the
it's
key to
called.
time, I think it's called. Yes, when you look at the Romana and you have that key to time storyline, which is one of my favorite storylines in Doctor Who history. The Keys of Marinus is like a mini version of it. It's
Hmm.
only 6 episodes of, and each one it feels like you are in while they're on this planet. Each one is in a different location, which is something that I really appreciate about this story, also because I hate when planets are like, oh, this is, in Star Wars you have Hoth, which is a giant ice planet, and the Ewoks live on a planet that's one big giant forest. There's an ecological difference in the various places that they go to throughout
Hmm.
this storyline.
And they get there
Um,
all by jumping through. I forget what they called them, but they're basically Captain Jack's um,
yeah, there's some sort of like portal, but not a portal. It's just Captain Jack's. I can't say watch because that's not
vortex
the right term.
manipulator.
Thank you, vortex manipulator. Basically, it's like an early usage of that. Like, I feel like one of the things that was nice, I kind of commented earlier how rewatching something is comforting. And with this Doctor Who serial story, however you want to call it as, it was comforting in the fact that it was familiar enough because in future Doctor Who stories, you can see where something like the vortex manipulator could have been inspired from this. The same with the Key to Time storyline. They're going through the planet and trying to find all these different key pieces and
Was
put
it
it
four
together.
keys?
I want to say it was four.
Okay, sounds right.
I'm trying
Six
to look it up.
episodes, an intro, a
An
conclusion,
intro and
four
then
keys.
conclusion and four keys. That sounds right. It also has a nice little love story with a uncomfortable happily ever after because the girl and I really should write some things down for these, but um, you've got this nice little love story that her dad unfortunately was killed, if I remember right, or whoever was taking care of her. Yeah, I really like in this story you've got these different pieces that they're trying to find. this planet full of a rich history. You have a love story in it. You got some decent danger, of course. And as always in Doctor Who fashion, Ian is on trial for something. I don't know why it feels like that just is a constant thing that Ian's life is very much threatened.
Yeah,
And if I
it's
remember
always
right,
something.
it's always something. And it didn't seem like it was Susan who was a Susan felt like a constant damsel in distress. Of this one, she doesn't quite have that.
That's kind of
Um,
nice.
it is one of the earliest episodes. It's in the first season. It was when I watched Doctor Who, started watching Doctor Who, trying to see what I could watch, different stories, pick them up on whatever it is that I was watching, take recommendations from you, Spencer, of course. This is not one that I had a chance to watch. The Aztecs were something that I had seen, and
Hmm.
An Unearthly Child. Daleks, as much as they are everybody's favorite weird villain, they're not mine. They just aren't. And I
Especially
really,
back in the day.
my mother-in-law is was born and raised in Ireland and cannot stand the Dalek. That is one of the scariest things to her, and I can understand in the 60s it would be, I'm sure.
I
Nowadays, mm, I would not want to see a Dalek. I'm going to be honest. If a real Dalek existed, I would not want to be anywhere near it. So I feel like it has so much to it that makes it really made it feel like Doctor Who was inspired almost by the Keys of Marinus in so many different ways. The way that the characters are and the way that things happen. The other side characters who are only in this story and how important they are to the Doctor. And I think that's one of the big ones that also I take from this is that these side characters, um, it feels like the Doctor really does care about them too. He doesn't just go to these planets and or history and start um, causing a ruckus because it is the Doctor. Um,
well, and back in
Up until
season
this,
one, he was like the grumpy old grandpa, like we said, and he honestly, in my opinion, he there were a few times, if I recall, that they arrived somewhere and he's like, "Nope, let's turn around. Oh wait, where's Susan? Oh, we can't leave yet."
you know,
And so he wasn't the David Tennant that was running into danger. He was very much trying to just, keep his head down.
well, and I mean, you and I are both parents. So you see a loved one in danger, and that is not okay. You don't want to put your child, grandchild in danger in that aspect. And again, I think Keys of Marinus is just, it's one of the, it feels like the first time, because it's only the fifth story, um, where the Doctor feels like he is trying to, he does still have his grumpy old man
Hmm.
piece to it, but he still when he realizes what he's doing and what they're needing to do, he just feels a little different and a little more caring of a person and not grumpy old grandpa like he is
Oh,
from most of the
agreed.
beginning. So,
Especially when Ian's on trial, if I recall, he jumps
mhm.
in and really helps.
And I mean, it is about the doctor with that. Like, that's what makes it also nice. Yeah, Susan does get kidnapped, of course, because it's
I guess it's
sadly
Susan.
her job, I think. But it's near the end, if I remember right. It's not really early on. It just is kind of later on, um, and I really do like that this story just has so many aspects. All the different locations. You've got ice versus woodsy versus city type locations. You've got a doctor who cares about the local inhabitants as much as his granddaughter because frankly he doesn't care about Ian and Barbara until they decide to leave, I think.
Pretty
um,
much.
and that's just kind of why one of the reasons why I kept this one at the top again, the familiarity of the different pieces being put together in the story. So
Well, and I made note on my original post about this that, I had gotten the DVDs from Netflix, which I don't even know if Netflix still does DVDs at this point.
don't either.
But yes, kids, Netflix used to come in the mail. Um, but by the time I got that DVD, I was already in the second and third Doctor eras on Hulu. So it was a change of pace having like episode story arcs
Right.
and to basically having six one-part stories.
Yes, that was the other thing is it does have an overall that you know they're going toward, but it really does feel like each episode is a little more contained. Again, back to the key to time concept that they use this. I think I'm sure there
Oh,
has to
I'm
be
sure there's
inspiration
too many
behind.
similarities.
Yep. Okay, we can move on from Keys of Marinus, but that's one of mine. Now we can go on to ours because I think the rest of them are ours until we get to the last one.
So the second one we on the list was the Romans. I did a blog post about this one earlier this year. It's partially, mostly lost, if I recall. Um,
No,
no, no. Okay, this is
Romans
not
is there.
this is not one of the ones that I listened to the audio of then. Um, but the general premise is that the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Vicky just get stranded. Well, they don't get stranded. They land in Roman times, um, and basically decide to take a vacation. Which I made note. How many times does the Doctor end up taking a vacation, and it just doesn't work out? Um,
Every time. If
the
the
fourth
doctor takes
Doctor went.
vacation, I'm sorry. I was
I
just gonna
was
say if the doctor takes a vacation and it doesn't work out, then we're gonna watch it. If it does work out, then it's a story we don't care about.
well, and this is a TARDIS vacation that wasn't planned, as opposed to the fourth Doctor
Yep.
going to the Leisure Hive, the 10th Doctor going to Midnight, the 13th Doctor going to Praxeus. They were all more or less planned, but the first
Yep.
Doctor just happened to land in um, Roman times, and well, things went crazy because he's the Doctor.
Well, I mean, and if I remember correctly, the TARDIS falls off a cliff or something, and they've got to
Well,
figure out how to get it.
that was the weird part. Is like at the end of the rescue where they meet Vicky, it our cliffhanger is that the TARDIS is literally falling off a cliff. But in the next episode, for the first episode of the Romans, it just picks up like nothing like they just picked it up in this Roman villa instead
Mhm.
of dealing with the TARDIS falling or anything.
Right. Nope. It's been a. I mean, if I remember, they've been in there for like a week or a month, I think,
I think a month sounds right.
in Rome in this random like unoccupied Roman villa, grabbing food or whatever. I mean, it just I think is. Um, I think it's one of the coolest episodes because of. I think it's to me it's one of the cool ones. It's Vicky's first adventure
Right.
that that we see, but of course I'm sure that it kind of really is, at least to them, since it's a continuing story. It's really
Yeah.
Vicky's first adventure. She hasn't they just rescued her in the previous episode before the story starts, and then she just takes a vacation. Like this poor girl has been on this planet terrorized by somebody,
Her
and now
father's best friend or
her
something.
father's best
Something.
friend, aka her father's murderer, and
Yeah.
now she's with this old grandpa dude. Which, I mean, that you definitely get the feeling of the Vicky Doctor grandpa granddaughter
Well, and he had
feel.
just left Susan in the 22nd century, so
Yep,
he had he's still a grandpa, but with no grandchild to dote on. And
yep. And if I remember, he accidentally calls her Susan every once in a while, forgetting.
yeah,
And I don't remember if that's this or if that's in the later one, but I
oh, I
thought it
think it's a
was
few
some
different ones.
yeah. And so and part of that I think was also William Hartnell. I'm listening to the audio book version of these, which is just really a recording of the episode, the audio recording of the episodes, and then added in like I think William Russell and a few others. They lend their voice as the narrator for the episodes. So
And if I recall correctly from what you told me about the narration, is it's more like they're explaining the stage directions.
yeah, basically like um I think that it's a lot in the earlier episodes. Now, of course, this reason we're not watching, or we're watching, not we don't have to listen to it, but in this episode it is, or in this time frame, it seemed to be a little more stage direction. As they went on, they got
Mhm.
a little more detailed, but not too much. It's basically just to help segue between scenes. And I feel like this is again back to this Romans thing, is to me this is like the first history based story that really works for me, because up till this point we have an unearthly child, which is okay, but I'm not a big fan of
The
uh,
Neanderthals.
Neanderthals. Marco Polo, which I thought was one of the most boring stories. It lasted at
It's a
least an
lot of
episode too long.
walking.
Yep.
How many episodes long was it?
It was seven. It was
Oh
one
my
longer
gosh,
than
it took
most.
forever.
It did. And you have the Aztecs, which I felt like it was an interesting way of showing differences between our culture and somebody else's in history, but it wasn't all that exciting. You then have the Reign of Terror when Barbara and Susan are both kidnapped by the French Revolution, and then the Romans is kind of really the first one of the second season that um, is a history telling story, and to me this is the first time it really works.
Well, and I remember thinking, I'm thinking during the Highlanders when Jamie's introduced in the second Doctor era that like this is the kind of when they wanted Doctor Who to be an educational show, this is the kind of episode they had been thinking of. There's no alien, there's no
Yep.
monster. It's just human beings, which that's monster enough in many cases.
Hmm.
Um, and it's the kind that's like, oh, I don't know a lot about this subject. Maybe I'd like to learn more. So,
And I mean, Roman history is one that where it is taught, and there are pieces that are, of course,
yeah.
up to the author here or the screenwriters at the time, um, that they just are like, well, this is how we're going to tell this. But a lot of the characteristics that they make are things that I remember learning about in history about
Hmm.
the Romans and who they were. And of course, the doctors, again, spoiler for a show that is older than you and I probably combined. Nope, not combined anymore. Older than you and I.
The
Yeah, it's
show's
about like
almost 60
70.
years old, let's put it that way.
Yeah, but combined, you and I make 70 or more. So, um, show is 60 years old, and this episode is like 58, 59.
Yeah.
But the doctor accidentally sets fire, which
Just one of the
causes,
many times that he just causes history to happen.
yeah,
So
it's one of
I did
those
a whole
things.
blog post on that one as well.
It's one of those things where it's like this is a fixed time in history, and he caused the Great Fire.
Just like he triggered the destruction of Pompeii, which, by the way, the fires of Pompeii with David Tennant references back to this story. So if you've
Does
seen
it really?
classic
I
Doc,
didn't remember that.
he there's a offhanded remark with to Donna, and we both love David Tennant and Donna Noble. So,
Hmm.
um,
I'll have to
but
look
there's
for
a
that next time I watch it.
yeah, there's an offhanded reference that he makes to the fire in Rome, and he's like, "Not my fault."
And he
And
knows it is, of course,
oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
because
right
that
now I'm
one,
looking
those
at a
are,
picture of Nero with a fire all ready to light the place up. So,
yep, definitely works. Um, Agreed. I think that this is one of those stories where it's just it's history without feeling like they're teaching us
mhm.
history. It's a more fun view of history.
And I had put in my blog post about this one that, there it was also just kind of comical and whimsical at times. Like the Ian and Barbara are separated from Vicky and the Doctor, and I swear you put some Scooby-Doo music on,
Hmm.
and it's wouldn't have seemed out of place because they never realized that they were,
I mean,
in the
they did
palace
not know they were both in the same house because both of them assumed both pairs assumed the other pair
was Salt
were
the Veal.
somewhere else.
Well, and I made note that they didn't. realize, yeah, they didn't realize that the other pair was there until
Hmm.
the web planet. So that's an episode, a story or two later, when, Vicky asks Barbara where she got this trinket,
Trinket, yep.
and it's like, oh, I got it from Nero's palace. Wait, what? We were there. What? What? So,
Yeah, I think this is one of the more comical, lighter stories, and maybe that was a necessity from Doctor Who era at the time, especially after Susan's departure, which was probably really sad. It's the first time um,
well, and
any
the
member
whole
of the
dynamics
TARDIS.
around him leaving her there because she didn't leave. He left
No,
her
she was
behind.
forced.
Yeah.
Yeah, not as kind again, but he
He,
also wanted her to grow, and he knew how it was going to happen by leaving her there. But with the Dalek invasion of Earth having just happened, and then a two-part episode for the rescue, which was kind of a quick story, but it didn't need any more, in my opinion. It was a
no,
great way to just introduce Vicky.
it was a
And
great story in its own right. So if we're recommending like one really good first Doctor story for someone, I'd say the Romans a pretty safe go.
I'd agree. I think the Romans is it's a first story to give you a feel of what original old school classic Doctor Who
Hmm.
really was, because it was meant to be somewhat educational, not just there's an
Monsters
alien
and Mayhem.
somewhere. Yep, exactly. Monsters and Mayhem.
So, but we've rambled on that one enough, so let's move on to The Chase. Another one that was on both of our lists.
Yep. Um,
It's another Dalek episode, so I know how much you love the Daleks.
well, this time I'm okay with the Daleks on this one because it's not the whole thing is a Dalek trap in its own
Mhm.
way, but it's like they're being chased by the Daleks, and so this one doesn't bother me as much. I liked the original Dalek episode for what it was. I really
It
felt
could have been
like
shorter.
it could have been at least one shorter. I feel like six is where the limit is for
Yeah,
me.
that's where I'm going to
Dalek.
struggle with the second Doctor. Is his final story is like 11 episodes long.
I know.
I'm going to
I'm
struggle.
honestly
I
as
think I
high,
may have watched that one on a grave shift when I first watched it, and I'm not sure it's going to go any better this time.
and it's one of the highest rated. So I'm kind of curious to see how well I like it myself. But I do feel like this with the chase, it is not uh, from a historical standpoint. And when I say historical, I mean like our normal timeline, our lives, real world thing. This is an episode. This is a story where William Russell and Jacqueline Hill are both go to the producer and say, "I'm done." Individually, they both were done, and I really think that they made the right move with that one. I think that was the right call because neither one of their characters seemed to be growing anymore. And so, but given how Doctor Who did things back then and listening to some of the extras that were with the um, audio recording on some of these things, it's a story where it they didn't know that they were going to be done. And so then they have to figure out how do we change this so that it ends with not just the Doctor and Vicky, right?
Well, and
And
it's one of those things that like, Doctor Who has had to evolve and adapt
mhm,
over 60 years, first with companions rotating when Susan left and Vicky came on, and
yep,
and Barbara and Ian left, and then Stephen came on.
just
But then
Steven, yeah,
only a couple years later, the Doctor, William Hartnell, was sick, so they had to do something, and they took a gamble. And because of that gamble, regenerating him into the second Doctor as we know him now, it's made it so that this series could last so long. I mean, Star Trek's been going on almost just as long, but it's different series within the franchise, different
yeah,
characters almost every time. But Doctor Who, it's the same character, different face for 60 years.
yep. And I
And
mean, it has some changes to its own history within its series,
oh, of
which
course.
depending on who you are, is whether or not it's okay. And I'm not judging one way or the other.
You talk about the timeless child.
That's part of it. But the Timeless Child is not the first time that William Hartnell was not technically not the first Doctor. Either way, with the chase, this is one of those moments where you've got again Susan left earlier after the Dalek invasion of Earth, and then now Barbara and Ian are leaving. To where you get after this, besides the first Doctor, the whole crew looks different. You've got a smaller
Yeah.
crew that you're about to get after this, and you don't even know that Stephen is going to join the TARDIS at this point. I say crew; it's not like one pilot who does everything is what the TARDIS is run by. Um, but it didn't feel like a finale episode until it got for Barbara and Ian. I mean, a final episode
Hmm.
for them until it gets closer to the end of it, and even after Stephen's introduction, it didn't quite feel like it. Took
Um,
it.
and we wouldn't see Ian again until the most recent story with the power of the Doctor when
Yep.
he appeared as an old man at Graham's companion support group.
And which is even more awesome that
Amazing.
technically let's say William Hart, no, William Russell, they're both William, made a world record with that technically
Oh yeah,
by portraying
he's
the same character that far apart in time. Um, so it's kind of a even cooler aspect. I mean, yes, he's done audio, but not appearing as Ian Chesterton from what is that 1965 to
66 maybe
2000.
at the latest.
Yeah,
No,
65,
65.
65,
Yeah, you're right.
65, and then appearing again in 2022, or was it earlier this year, 2023?
No, it was last year.
Last year, 2022. So, I mean, that's a big gap, and that's a record to have somebody go away from a show and have. I mean, anybody who's a modern only fan, I don't think they recognize the significance as much, but they still think that they recognize who he was and know that, oh, he is one of the first companions and like literally the first companion. And so it gives a lot of feels
Unless you
for,
count Susan, but no one seems to.
I mean, he was the first companion. He's in the first episode. I don't care. Susan's the first companion. They're all three first companions in my book.
Uh,
So yeah, I know. I
I'm just
love
being
first companion.
nitpicky.
Yeah. Susan wasn't his companion so much as his grandchild who's just with him.
River Song wasn't so much his companion as his wife.
That is quite true. But
That's a little
she
more
is his
complicated.
companion and not his companion. That's a whole different storyline.
Yep.
And I don't know. I think that it was a really well done story. Again, it's similar to that Keys of Marinus concept
Hmm.
where each episode kind of stands on their own.
Well, and I'm looking at it right now on the Doctor Who wiki, and it's got like six different places for the main setting, jumping from New York City in 66 to the Mary Celeste in 1872, the Festival of Ghana in 1996, and and then looks like two alien planets.
Yeah.
So,
And again, I mean, obviously this is 1965 that it was written and done, so nothing futuristic had happened by any means. But from the other perspective is it brings in another one of those history moments, kind of similar to the Romans, where you've got the um, the Mary Celeste brought in. I mean, was a real ship, and it has a very unique history. Um, I mean, I kind of wish they could have expanded on what happened with it from a Doctor Who perspective, but
oh, you can
um,
bet the spin-off material probably has at some point.
oh well, I'm sure it has, but um, I maintain canon going with just the episodes of what aired, and I add in whatever I feel like when I'm bored.
It sounds about right.
But I mean, the chase is a really it's a really good storyline. Um, it it sadly isn't ranked very high. out of like, so I've looked at IMDb and all the different ratings, and I like did an average of the episodes and kind of rated them just to see where my rankings or where my thoughts fell. And so the chase is a little lower. It ends up at 12th um, in IMDb rating, compared to being one of my top five stories here. But I also feel like it was a really good introduction to Steven Taylor, who would come in, not Steven Tyler, the lead singer of Aerosmith, Steven Taylor, played by Peter. Yeah, see, I'm going to screw up his name. Introduction of Steven Taylor, who is played by Peter Purves, in a way that was kind of a fun introduction on the Doctor could meet a companion anywhere.
Mm-hmm. And then that kind of leads into the next one on our list, the Time Meddler, which I believe is
It
is
is the
the
next
next
story.
episode. And
Yep.
Steven has this moment, and I think Ian had the same moment where, and I know Ben does later on, where it's like, oh no, we didn't travel in time. You're just, pulling my leg here.
And Dodo does that as well. I know that your love of Dodo, but
Oh,
she does do
Dodo.
that as well in the arc.
Mm,
So
that,
hey, you've got a Dodo. Well, you've got two Dodo stories on your list, so you don't get to say too much bad about
oh,
her,
I do. Oh, that's right. She's just, we'll get into that in our second episode when we
Yeah.
talk about companions. Um,
Yes, but with the Time Meddler, you get the introduction of the first really non-human human looking non-human, besides the Doctor and Susan in the monk.
well, and more specifically, another Time Lord. They weren't
Yep.
called Time Lords back then,
No.
but this is the concept that very possibly inspired the Master.
Yeah.
And the monk has appeared across. I know I said that the spin-off material is kind of semi-canon and all
I
that.
said that. You can call it canon. That's your canon.
Well, off screen we've said it too.
Right,
Uh,
right,
you
right.
know, behind
No,
the scenes we've said it.
I mean,
So,
he is a character that could have been brought back in,
well, especially as a
and
Time
sadly
Lord, they
wasn't.
give him another regeneration. I mean, I know he appeared as the nun in some of the spin-off material. There's so much they could do with him or Susan or Romana or
Or the
just,
Rainy.
yeah, there's so many.
Anybody besides the Master, we are kind of done with the Master.
I'm kind of done with them. I mean, I
But
would love
I'm
to.
done with the Master like I'm done with the Daleks too. So,
I'd be happy to have more Master. Just mix in some of the others.
yep.
Like it doesn't have to be no Daleks, no Master. It's throw in some other ones that we haven't seen in a long time.
Hmm. I mean, and we've never seen the Time Meddler on screen. I'll make it that way since the first Doctor's era,
Yeah, because he appeared in
because
the Dalek Master Plan for an episode or two,
mhm,
but that's last appearance on screen was, and most of that story's lost. Both of us had to listen to it with audio.
yeah, yep. I listened to that as an audio, and I mean, it was nice that this is a character that could have been brought back more, right? And again, the first Time Lord before they knew what a Time Lord was, or
Regeneration or
Gallifrey
any of
or
that.
regeneration. I mean, legitimately, the monk has places that the monk could appear. And the 11th Doctor was right. Monks are not cool. So um,
Well, that was
the
one of my proudest moments was when I decided to meme that with his line, "Monks are not cool," and second frame is the monk going, "Excuse you,"
yep.
but I'm just too proud of myself.
It was clever. I will give you
I also
that.
did one of the same shot of the 11th Doctor and the first Doctor dressed as a monk in that episode.
In that same episode. Yep.
Yep. Oh, it
But
was,
I don't think the first Doctor knew. Well, I mean, if first Doctor is the grumpy old grandpa, then
maybe
by all
that's why he
means
knew
that
that
he's
monks
not
weren't
cool.
cool.
Yep. Um, you've got another TARDIS. That's the other thing is you got the first appearance of a second TARDIS, right? If I remember
Yeah,
right in
and
Time Miller.
one that actually shape shifts into how as it should instead of just looking like a police box.
Yep. And the Doctor is a pretty big jerk, and he breaks the Time Meddlers or the monks' TARDIS, but
But also the monk was
monk,
abusing it, so I don't know how much you
yeah,
can actually
definitely.
call him a jerk.
I know. I was just
Although
teasing
he
there.
did seem to take some sick pleasure out of it too. That's a
Yep.
another
Um,
another issue
the
altogether.
the other thing that I find interesting in this one, no, it fits on our list, but it's also not just us who are praising this one because the so there's a Doctor Who magazine, and this was voted second out of all the first Doctor stories, and out of IMDb's average rating for an episode, this was rated third. So I do think that Peter Butterworth, who plays the monk, did an excellent job in that character,
Hmm.
and just it made it for a fun possibility. It's one of those what could have been had something different happened in the writer's room, and being able to bring in more monk. You know, uh, it
Well,
would
it's
it
like
would.
you were saying with the Keys of Marinus, it kind of set the precedent for
Mhm.
things to come. We got the Master and the Ronnie as rival Time Lords later in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, etc. Doctor eras,
Right,
um, which very possibly wouldn't have happened if not for this. The just like the
exactly.
keys to time wouldn't have, might not have existed had it not been for the keys of Marinus.
Yep. I mean, I think it's kind of fun to see the out of place, the monk having found his way into his own place in history, being um, trying to be sneaky. I mean, it's 1066. We're in 11th century um, time frame, and the monk has a gramophone. He's playing a record in the
Hmm.
with monk chants. It's like it's kind of a fun little like they discover that, and uh, it took me a second to realize like when they discovered it when I'm watching this episode again. This is one of those ones that is not lost, thankfully. You can watch it on a if you have the appropriate access, pay for the appropriate access. um, I can't even think of what it's called. BritBox. That's what I have. BritBox. Um, if you have BritBox, I was sitting there watching it and the gramophone, and they go and they turn it off, and I'm sitting there like, yeah. So I figured it was fake. Oh wait, that's not supposed to be there, is it? They're not in 20th century England. They're in a different. They're in the history, aren't
Hmm.
they?
Yep.
So it was kind of a fun. It was more fun. It had lighter moments, especially discussions and arguments between the first Doctor and the monk, and it has its more serious tone when it needs to be.
No, of course.
Um,
Anything else you want to say about that one?
I don't think I have anything else about the monk. The Time Meddler does finish off the second season of classic Doctor Who. It is the finale story, which to me they didn't do a great job with that in Doctor Who history until later on. But with the Time Meddler, that really felt like a true end of a season type storyline
Hmm.
because it was the first introduction of another TARDIS, basically, and another person who's controlling that TARDIS, somebody who is from what we know today as Gallifrey, and
Nah, if
another time.
only, nah, if only they'd done more with him.
It is. It's one of those coulda, shoulda, wouldas,
Yep.
which is good because that's what's leading us to lead segues us really well into our next episode. Is it a potential coulda, woulda, shoulda we have coming up here soon?
You talking about the
Um,
last one?
no, not the last one. The next one. The slash. Oh, do I have it backwards?
So the next one on our list is the Ark. It's Dodo's first story, and like TJ mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of Dodo. She just seems to be honestly, I was thinking about this as I was running errands earlier, and it seems she's kind of a bit of an Amy Pond, and you know how I feel about Amy Pond. I don't get it. Anyways,
You
but
no
she
love
just kind of
for Karen Gillan, huh?
oh no, I have love for Karen Gillan, just not for Amy Pond. Um, but Dodo just like stumbles into the TARDIS as just and honestly, her arrival into the TARDIS and her departure both were just underwhelming. Um, and then
Right.
I don't feel like
Go ahead.
she had much growth, if you want to use that word, throughout her time on the TARDIS. But we can get into that more in the next episode.
Yeah, I was going to say we can get in that more on the companion discussion, but this to me, Dodo feels like somebody who they didn't know how to write.
Mm,
Um, like it felt like in the first half, one of the things I think about the arc that is great is you've got these two halves of this story, right? You've got this one that is when they arrive on um the arc, and then you've got this other half which is 700 years later.
mm.
And I think that was a great aspect to this story. But
Well,
Dodo seems to adapt out of nowhere in the second one to her surroundings. And it seemed like a very difficult thing for her to do at the very beginning.
yeah,
And
I'd agree with
and
that.
and so I mean she just like you mentioned, like Ian, similar with um, Stephen and Ben and a lot of companions, you can't go through time. And that's,
Just absolutely refusing to take the Doctor's claim as truth.
yep, and that is exactly what Dodo does, and she brings her cold into this planet.
Which I think
And her
that's a really interesting part of the story. You know, she brings her cold, which has been eradicated by this point in the distant future, and a whole civilization almost dies because of the common cold, and it and sets them up for conquest by their. I'm going to compare them to house elves from Harry Potter because that's basically what they were. Um,
the monoids.
yeah, the monoids had were their servants basically, um, and the humans were basically brought to their knees just by the common cold. Crazy to think, but here we are. Um,
Exactly. I mean, and I think that was a great way to tell the story of here is something that is so normal in our everyday lives. I mean, in the 1960s, common cold was still the common cold. I mean, this is before we have so many medicines to help. And in all honesty, like what so many people say today, there's still no real cure to a common cold. There are ways to prevent getting a cold, and there are ways to stave off symptoms of getting a cold. That's what Dayquil and NyQuil are. So while this civilization has that cure somehow, or they just are in a place where it is not something that a person can catch for whatever reason.
well, they could
And
catch
that,
it.
well, I mean, they couldn't catch it without it being introduced from a third party source.
Okay.
The planet refuses to. Um, there's no common cold on it,
Nope.
and the humans
Right, they weren't bringing it
are
with
so
them.
susceptible. But if I remember right, weren't there monoids who got killed by it too? It wasn't just
I
humans.
I believe you're right. It was both civilizations, and I think that was part of what in the second half got the monoids in control. Is they were upset that if I'm right that their people, their civilization was kind of left by the wayside a little bit, like humans prioritized.
Yep. I mean the monoids were not treated well, which I think is a great thing to remind people that it doesn't matter what somebody else looks like, what your life is. Treat other people kindly because it's the way that the humans treated the monoids that led to the monoid coup and attempt to, or not attempt, succession of taking over the whole planet or whatever it really was, the area they were in.
Hmm. Well, and I will continually quote this line from Pokemon, and
Hmm.
I did a blog post about it because I've done blog posts about so many things by this point. Um, but in the first Pokemon movie, Mewtwo says, after all is said and done in the movie, I see now that the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. It is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are. Because it was clone Pokemon versus regular Pokemon, and he learned that we can coexist. And I think,
And yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say differences can be celebrated and utilized, and instead of being shamed and hated,
Hmm.
both by others and by ourselves.
Yeah, I mean that's probably one of the other things is that, it's more. I love the reminders that come throughout Doctor Who of, well, this is your fault because of you choosing that you are better than somebody else. That is a constant theme throughout Doctor Who and Leverage, and other series as well, I'm sure. I feel like with this one, it has it in a tone that is soft enough that it's still powerful. It's soft enough without being in your face and powerful enough that you can still feel it, in my
Well, and that was
mind.
one
And
of the things that it was unsettling about the 12th Doctor's story Smile, because those
Mhm.
emoji bots, I mean, they solved the problem and everything, and then the Doctor just left them to sort it out for themselves, which was dark because the humans were going to make the same mistakes all over again.
Yeah.
But,
And I mean,
free will.
you've got that with the um not year before, but season before, with the Doctor and Clara and the Zygons. Man, I cannot come up with the name. You have that same concept where it's like you have to coexist. Stop
Hmm.
thinking one of you is better. Stop. You have to make a choice. I love that line from him. And it doesn't matter which one's good because maybe there's not one, but you still have to make one, and you got to deal with the consequences of it.
I feel like I could tie in the infamous Moon Egg episode, but we can just breeze
Oh,
past
that's
that.
not. Other than I'll slap you so hard you'll regenerate. Yeah, okay.
We can ignore that one until we get to the 12th Doctor era, which
Yes,
will
we
take
can.
us a while.
Not going to be on
Um,
my top few episodes for that one, other than
oh, but
Clara's lines.
yeah, we can discuss that then. Um,
So just to point out one more time, the arc is on your list of top five, not on mine. Just want to make sure that's a little
yeah.
clear. It's lower down on my list overall. I've got a few in between that we're not going to be talking about, but uh,
That's all right.
I kind of liked it a little bit better, and that's all good.
I've
Okay,
just got two last thoughts on the arc.
go
One,
ahead.
one, um, they talk about escaping the destruction of Earth, which I haven't been able to nail down a date for it. But both times I've watched that, I've thought, huh, that could be like when the Ninth Doctor takes Rose to the space station with Lady Cassandra and everything. That could be the same time period that on one hand the Doctor's here with Rose, and on the other hand the Doctor's in deep space with his colony of humans. So
Well, and that's something in the Ninth Doctor. In that story, it is stated that humans haven't lived on Earth in a long time. It's been completely
yeah,
evacuated, deserted. It's just waiting for the sun to explode.
but I just
Um,
love the callbacks there that it makes
mhm.
it relevant. You know, if you only watch new Doctor Who, great, enjoy. But if you watch through classic Doctor Who like we're doing, you get a little extra sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I will maintain that if you don't watch classic Doctor Who and then you go to, um, oh my gosh, second season episode that brings back Sarah Jane, it just doesn't have
Oh,
as power,
it's,
the
yeah.
power behind it.
Heck, even if you
Um,
haven't watched it, but you understand the significance of it,
mhm.
because some of it is
No,
hard to watch, and that's fine.
yeah, but that episode alone, I mean, that bringing back, that
Oh,
call back,
Sarah
it's so much
Jane.
nicer to bring to know what
Agreed.
to know the context behind something like that. And again, something like this, where Earth has been destroyed, and um, in this idea, I mean, I would probably envision that Earth hasn't necessarily been destroyed; it's just uninhabitable, and to them that would be just the
Hmm.
same as destroyed. I
Yeah.
mean, and when civilizations leave, history might get a little adjusted in the book. Destroyed versus uninhabitable, not much
Yep.
different. Okay, you ready to move on to our?
Yep. Um, so the final story on our list is the Celestial Toymaker. Now, if you're following some of the rumors about the 60th anniversary, this could be pretty significant. There are rumors, at least that I've heard, that Neil Patrick Harris is going to portray the Celestial Toymaker, which is
And that is
interesting
my
because,
favorite rumor that I've heard about
right,
that 60th
it would be
anniversary.
quite odd for them to do this. As much as I want it, it would be really odd because none of one episode of, I think it's four parts.
Hmm.
One episode of the four still exists in full. The rest of it, we just we just listened to an audio form.
Hmm.
So,
And
and
that's what makes it so weird and at the same time really kind of awesome.
I'm just waiting for a time traveler to bring the Celestial Toymaker to the present in their TARDIS so that we can have the Celestial Toymaker in time for the 60th.
Well, and that would be nice if somebody could do that finally and get a lot of these lost episodes on our on BritBox, for those of us that have
Yeah.
that or whatever else you have. But I'm, one of these days maybe. I keep wishing for it, and hopefully somewhere somebody has the missing episodes.
Yep.
I
Someone will
mean,
find
seeing
it
as
in their
how
grandma's
some of them were,
basement.
yeah, somehow they're in some um, the lost sheds and stuff like that. That they've found some in. So it'll be interesting just to see what it would be nice to be able to see this complete episode or complete story.
Hmm.
Um,
And it
and
was just so intriguing in many ways because
mhm,
it was not the same as Keys of Marinus because it's still the same place
mhm.
ish. It's outside of space and time, basically. But each episode was like its own event. Steven and Dodo, as much as I just don't like her, each episode they had a different trial they had to face, while the Doctor was facing off against the Toymaker.
And that's what, learning about the history on this one a little bit more from the production standpoint. William Hartnell was on holiday, as they would say, for
Oh,
the
I thought
second
this was
and third
part of what
episode.
I thought this was when he was started getting sick.
No, he was actually on vacation for the second and third episode, and they just recorded him saying some lines, and
Yeah.
had like a body double or a hand double, just to show him playing the games. And so um, it does have to focus on Steven and Dodo because it becomes a Dr. Light episode for that reason.
Yeah.
And this is the one episode I really do like of Dodo.
Hmm.
Again, this is in my top five.
Agree.
Um, and this is the one where I feel like Dodo has some sort of not just growth but proof of intelligence.
Oh yeah.
Um, like the arc, she kind of did, but this one, she's not. She and Steven are both stuck, and they are not. Neither one is like a damsel in distress concept. They're both trying to figure it out together. And that is one of the things that I do like about Dodo, despite her weird entrance into the TARDIS. And then we have the arc, which was, like I said, it is a good episode. It's just not one of my favorites. Um, with the Celestial Toymaker, on the other hand, you have her really taking a stand, moving forward, working with Steven, not he needs to help her.
Well, and all these trials that the Toymaker puts them through, it's a
Yep.
test of their intelligence, which shows just how clever they are. And I think in
Mhm.
Dodo's case, it's I don't think she's book smart. I honestly don't think she
No,
was
I don't think
that
she's
great in
book
school,
smart.
but she's clever in ways that Stephen, who is very smart, wasn't. So they kind of played on each
And
other's
that's why
strengths.
they played on off each other really well in this. And I mean, we'll come back to that in the companion discussion, like we said. But with this one, it stands out. I mean, it's ranked really low, probably because you can't watch it. That's what my interpretation of that is that. But if anybody listening, I'm gonna throw another recommendation out there. I have Audible, and I listened to all the First Doctor stories that are not available to be watched on Audible. And it was not it was a lot better than I would have thought they were going to be. And this is one where I didn't have. Oh, I take it back. I didn't watch this one on Audible, but I'd still recommend it. It's still worth listening to. It's one of those that if you only worry about what you can watch, and you don't care about the missing stuff at all, and you do try to watch the classic, this is one where it's like, look, I would highly recommend listening to it to get that story, because it's still, when it comes down to the canon idea again, you can't take the TV show episodes away from canon, and this is one. Um, and it is one where it is worth listening to so that you get that full feel of the
Hmm.
story. I cannot stand the clowns,
Oh, those are
and
so weird.
you're not supposed to. You have to hate those. Like, they were bizarre, more bizarre than I even envisioned. And it was kind of funny because they reused the same actors, which you don't really get to see that in that cleverness behind it in later episodes of the same story, because they could. They had an episode where they were clowns and another episode where they're randomly in a kitchen, just two completely different people.
I mean, but they're all people that the toy maker has captured over
Mhm.
time. So in some ways, that's perfect. He's just recasting these people into new roles.
And having them play their own game for him.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what
Um,
makes him. And that's the thing, is the Special Toy Maker. We don't have a clarity on whether or not the character
2 minute
in
mark.
this. We don't have a clarity in this, if this character is actually a um, a Time Lord, or who he really is
Um,
in the Doctor Who world and Doctor Who sense. I mean, is he similar to a um,
best
kicked
we
out
know from
Time
what I
Lord? And go
best we
ahead.
know from what I read is that at least according to the pseudo canon stuff,
Mhm.
um, he's not a Time Lord.
Right.
He's
And it would make
we
more sense that he's not.
yeah, but we still don't know what he is. If he's not a Time Lord, what is he? And
Yeah.
that could be, well, I'm just gonna say it's this story is less than $10 on Audible if you don't want to use your credits on that.
Right.
Um, and I recommend doing that if before the 60th anniversary comes out. Well, that about wraps up our discussion on Doctor Who stories for the first Doctor. We'll be back in our next Doctor Who episode discussing our favorite companions and the ones we didn't like, Dodo. Um,
Wrong.
but that's a discussion for another day. So we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for listening to the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we don't represent the church in any official capacity. Remember to subscribe to the podcast. You can see our show notes and blog posts on latterdaysaintgeeks.com, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Latter-day Saint Geeks. Music was provided courtesy of David Schradel.